Hello, welcome to my channel, Syahdian Sophia. In this occasion, I'd like to explain about how to understand our full reports on the personality fingerprint test. As you know, my channel here explain about things that is handled in fingerprint personality test. So we hope that by understanding our fingerprint, we can understand how our brain functions, and we can act according to it, because that is a blessing. So I suggest that all my clients should be aware about what is their strengths, also what's their weakness based on the personality fingerprint test. And maybe you can see from my previous video that I posted, it was first of all, how do we take the fingerprint sample by using the scanner, and then very recent video was that I explained the result of the fingerprint test in Bahasa Indonesia. And now here in this occasion, I'd like to explain the full reports version of our personality fingerprint test in English. I've had posted the Bahasa on my last update, just in case you would like to compare. Well, not necessarily any different anyway. It's supposed to be all the same, but only that I explain it in English. So, to appreciate each other, please do hit the subscribe button on your right, or if you have any comments or inputs, put in a comment below. And from now on, the talk is about to start. So, for your information, in Indonesia, there are lots of providers on personality fingerprint test, and ours is from Talent Spectrum. And we offer the personality fingerprint analysis test to be used not only for students who still unsure about where they would go for further study, as in what major they should take, but also it will be useful for those who wants to reach the personal goal or personal mission even better for the future. So it is not only for those who are still in development age, for example for students or even for fresh graduate. It can also be used for those who loves to find his own call or her own call, or even to know what you actually are and what's the dominant characteristic you have. Because I also took the test on my 20-ish age, and I found something that is basically very heartwarming and very eye-opening. So I hope that by this sharing, I can also inspire others to find yourself, because according to one of the wise words, it says that if you know who you are, you will know your God. So then, without further information, I would just go to the first page of the personality fingerprint test. So this report is taken from one of my clients who has enrolled in an international-based curriculum school, and he needed it to support his choice of choosing the major he planned to enroll for his university study. As you can see in the first page, it has shown the fingerprints client's profile. That was 10 of the fingerprint traces, and it was taken on the top is all the profile from the left hand taken, and then start from the thumb, index finger, middle finger, ring finger, and also the pinky finger. As well as on the bottom one, you see only that is for the right hand. It's basically the same thing. The order is the same thing. So besides that, on the other picture, you will see there is the ATD number. Maybe you'll see here right in front, I have put a sign into it. The ATD is basically an angle obtained from the marking on the palm of the client. So when you look at the two previous videos of mine, it was shown how I took the sample. And before I took the sample, I always measure the ATD angle using the protractor. And it will show how the brain would respond. How do we receive the information, and how do we also deliver the information based on the brain activity. So basically it was a sign that if a person have a normal processing of how the brain works, probably the test would continue. But if we found something lacking, for example, the ATD angle is not normal, in which it's mostly like below 30-ish angle, then I would brief the client and suggest them to come to child psychologist or any child psychiatrist development. Maybe there is something that we need to discuss further for further information. So, and I was really glad that so far all my clients has the ATD, like latest was like 39 and also the highest was 55, and that was still considered to be normal. So the angle is telling you that. So for the next picture on the bottom left, you see there are some graphs that shows the distribution of the pattern for all the fingers. And you see here R1 represents the right thumb, R2 represents the right index finger, R3 right middle finger, R4 the right ring finger, and the R5 the right pinky. Repeats for all the fingers for the left side. So you see the 10 profile and who is the most dominant. And you see there are two categories of pattern distribution here. One is the specialist and the other is the generalist. What's the difference? As the name says, specialists are for those who has specific interest into something. So this person is considered to have literally like a hard time to understand things, but once he understands something deeply, he'll be really good at it. As the opposite of the generalist, the person who considered to be generalist would show all of the distribution pattern area was almost on the right proportion. So they are almost having the same height. And that is a sign that this person has basically lots of interest and probably a really fast learner. The problem is they are also having hard time to find their own interest. Only a little information about fingerprint analysis calculation. So the structure of the fingerprints consists of lines which are classified into several parts. The lines on the fingerprints create certain patterns called fingerprint patterns. These fingerprint patterns start to form genetically when an embryo is 13 weeks old. And the development of the fingerprint pattern is influenced by the working of the brain neurons. Recorded on these pyramidally formed fingerprint patterns are the workings of the neurons, the functions of the parts of the brain, and the correlations with the dominance of the brain hemisphere, cerebral lobes, and triune brain. The identification, classification, and calculation of the epidermal lines are expected to give psychological interpretations of the person's character and talents. So as you know that some students are basically facing a time where they are confused what to study about or what to be specified in. So by doing or taking this test, we sincerely hope that the children or the students or even the parents would be having enlightenment for choosing the specific university that she or he wants to study. And as you know, things about fingerprints are actually intriguing for me because for some reason many people think that it was the same like forecasting. It's not. So fingerprint analysis is not a forecast. It is a technique based on a statistically, mathematically formula on the distribution of pattern and the behavioral of certain patterns. And we have mapped that most of the distribution and that some patterns are matching with some characteristic. So we've been thought that this could help to find some characters or some talents that might be missing. Of course, this is not the only must when it comes to find a talent. Remember, a talent is basically considered of when you train really hard for something and it meets the genetic. So basically, we will find what is your true blueprint by doing the fingerprint test. Anyway, that was about the first page. So again, it was only telling you the 10 profile of the fingers of the clients, and also it shows the ATD number. Here my client has a very normal ATD angle, which is around 44 to 48, and my client shows here the distribution that is, I can say, considerably generalist, because when you see the L3, 4, 5 and R3 and R5 is around the same number. Also L1 and L2. The only dominant here is R2, but that is also not too significant. So I would say my client have a generalist type in which he basically has quite a lot of interest, but he's finding hard to match or to find what is his true interest in it. So that's why I kind of understand why this client wants to have the fingerprint test. Number 2, it was the personal drive. As you see that our body is made of many neurons, and as you see that nerve system is the life blueprint. So the central nerve system has the function of receiving, processing, interpreting, storing incoming sensory information, and also sending messages to the muscles, glands, and internal organs. The nerve systems consist of neurons responsible for sending information to, from, and within the central nerve system. So here, on the first picture, you will see how well you receive information and how fast your neurons send the information to your brain. So if the graph shows a higher percentage of detail, as what is in this case, it shows more 52.8% detail than global 47.2. It means that this client puts more focus on the precision of the information. Thus, the process of receiving information happens more slowly. When, for example, later on when you take the test and you got the result and turns out yours is global, that is dominant than detail, it means that you put more focus on the gist of the information by focusing only on the essence of information. You dedicate a shorter time to absorb the details. So in this case, my client have a detail, so it was quite slow to process information because he need to grasp all the detail. On the next picture, it shows how the brain responds to information. And this will tell you how you process information and how fast your neurons send the information from the brain to the muscle. So again, the two differences of the graphs are, on the top one, it was about how the process of information is received and then delivered to the brain. But on the second graph shows how the brain delivers all the information all to the muscle. Therefore, it will shows how you respond to that specific information. Here, if the graph shows a higher percentage of reasoning compared to that responsiveness, you need more time to process information before responding to any situation, coming up with the decisions and taking actions. This happens because you need to analyze the information, and this is not the case on my client's result because the reasoning has a number of 33% while the responsiveness level is above it, which is 67%. And you see that what happened when the responsive level is higher than the reasoning. If the graph shows a higher percentage of responsiveness compared to that reasoning, the client needs a shorter time to make decisions and to take actions. So here, as you see that it links basically to the ATD. So therefore, my client is considered to have the respond type of responsive because turns out he needs a shorter time to make decision. He's very fast in giving response and also to take action according to it. Alright, that was about the second page. What is now the third page? Now on the third page of the reports, I will explain about the basic character. So as you see that to know the basic characters of human, we should know what is the motivation and where it is coming from. So you see that here in psychology, to know the basic character of a person, we studied about the triune brain. So anyway, before I forgot, so basically in the fingerprint analysis test, we take many theories in psychology and applied it based on the fingerprint patterns and on the statistic that I mentioned before. So to understand the basic characteristic and what it is linked to the patterns of fingerprint we have, so now we took the theory of triune brain. As you see that the brain consists of three areas, which is one, neocortex. When it shows the dominance in this area, it leads to an individual to have logical thinking process as the basis of his behavioral. So this person that has dominance on the neocortex area would have more action that is goal-oriented. Now the second one is the limbic system. So in the limbic system, if the client is having dominance in this area, that is based on the feeling. So it was like more people-oriented. And the last one, brainstem, which is very reflective science. When a client has a dominance in this area, it will make individual adhere to very strong belief. And as you see from my client, this is basically the basic character here is based on the theory of brain evolution, which is what we call a triune brain theory. The human brain is divided into three parts, which determine different preferred dominance in each individual. And this preferred dominance is based on the part of the brain that is more responsive. So basically we see here my client has around 90% neocortex and only 10% limbic system dominance. So it means 90% of this person traits are very goal-oriented. It was actually good at some point where this client is focusing on the goals, what he has. And compared to the limbic system, it actually has a little bit side of people-oriented. So this is actually a sign that he is very determined to achieve his goals, but for some reason he needs to be putting more care about the people around, because apparently the goals sometimes that he wants to achieve make him forgetful. I mean, like sometimes, you know, when somebody has reached a goal and they are basically not really care about the person around, and I don't want my client to do that. So I have to remind him what should he do. Basically at the end, when he actually is not following what I say, it's his life. So but I suggest, because of his traits of fingerprint character shows that he is very goal-oriented and has only a little feeling toward people. So it doesn't mean that, oh, this client has no belief or something. No, that's wrong. That is not how you read it. But basically we read it from where the dominance starts. So it means that the belief system in my client is not dominant. Alright, so now we go to the next page, which is page 4. In the page 4, we explain about basic motivation. In psychology, there is a theory of motivation which states that people aim at fulfilling their basic needs. In their effort to do this, they try to fulfill their needs in accordance to their self-motivation. So to understand this, we base the finding on the profile of the person. So as you know, maybe when you scroll down in my YouTube channel and YouTube videos, you will see there are many types, many patterns of fingerprint, and mainly it is considered into 3 different types: whorl, loop, and also arch. So as you see, each main pattern has also its own divisions, but for that you can just click on the videos according to it. If I haven't translated into English, I'll do it based on the request, so just put a comment below. Alright, here is the explanation about the 10 traits of your fingerprint test. So as you see here, there are basically 10, 5 for the right hand and 5 for the left hand. So, but here I have cut into 2 parts. First, I took the first, second, and third fingers on the right, also on the left, which are represent the first line is the thumb, second line is the index finger, and the third line is the middle finger. Alright, so the thumbs are explained about how this person built the relationship with others, how we build relationship with ourselves. So it is something related to the self-management. So right thumb is about self-management, and left thumb is about the relationship with others. So as you see, both shows cognitive side. It means this client has a whorl shape. So the meaning of having whorl is that this client wants to socialize because of a reason. So this client wants to get the recognition and the benefit from others. Friends with benefit. So I would actually not having any judge about this, because for me, to be honest, when we want to get help from others, we ask friends, right? And the word says, oh, you are just friend when you are just in need. It was actually not really a sarcastic word, I guess, because you have to be happy actually when a friend needs you. It means you are useful to them. That is the right mindset to it. So what about on the right thumb? It was about self-management, self-principle, discipline, consistency in carrying out a task, and learning process. So this client has a cognitive trait. It means he wants to develop self-mastery and achievement for himself. So when he feels that it is good to do that, he'll take it. And I'm really glad that he at the end took the fingerprint test to help him, because remember, it is actually not that easy to convince people to get the test, because they need to be open. And I don't want to force my client to do my test, because sometimes it feels a burden to them. I don't want that. But when I just explain, like when they are interested and then I explain and they turns out they're interested, it means they see how important it is for their next step of life. So for the next finger, it was the index fingers. So on the left index finger, the client again shows the cognitive traits. Anyway, index finger shows the thinking analysis of idea, which are imaginative, creative, conceptual, holistic, subjective, and intuitive, and it relies on feelings. While on the right index finger, it shows that this client has a double loop sign because it states dual affective. Anyway, thumb finger on the right shows the thinking analysis of idea in terms of planning, logical, rational matters related mostly to calculation, structure, objective, and also factual basis. So now what does it mean? So on the left index finger, when he has cognitive traits, he will be creative and innovative when it comes to the ego. At the time of clear objectives and benefits, when the client feel appreciated, your creativity will emerge as the originality of your self-actualization. So basically, for parents who has kids that the result of his left index finger is cognitive, they need a reward. They need an appreciation of what they already did. because that will motivate the students even better at something. Alright, so while on the right index finger, he shows the double loop sign. It means the way he makes decisions is based on very analytical logic and has a lot of consideration, both risk and purpose. It's tend toward perfection. So he tries to make many considerations before he plans something. Alright, so for the third fingers on the left middle finger, it was cognitive. It means this client again has a world pattern. So the middle finger explains the acting and expressing in creative and artistic way, while on the right middle finger, it will translate into how the client act and express in a structural, operational, and technical way. And here you see that if the client has a world type on the middle finger, it means the client's flexibility will be affected by the ego of himself. The client are not the one to follow the rules and customs that exist. He tends to dare to act in accordance with the interests and goals of his own. So sometimes when he notices that something is off, he would immediately realize that and act according to that. So while on the right middle finger, he shows the cognitive sign. So the actions will be influenced by their own ego. He is not the one to follow the rules. He has a tendency to act against the rule if the rule is not right somehow. So what about the fourth finger, which is the ring finger? He has both signs of dual affective, and on the first row of this page, you'll see that it was dual affective, another double loop. And anyway, ring finger shows how the client communicates. On the right hand, communicating through artistic auditory expression using intonations, languages, and music. And on the left ring finger, it was how he communicates through structural auditory expression using linguistic or even sentence arrangement. And as you see that since both are dual affective, so he shows a double loop sign. He has the tendency to talk and prioritize the delivery of much consideration and in-depth analysis. Again, something like when he wants to convey something, he tried to make it more diplomatic way. So he need to convey things in the perfect way. Pinky finger of his on the left side, is affective, and on the right side it's cognitive. So it is for adaptation. So on the left side is the adaptation to the observed social trends, and he is very adaptive. And on the right side, it was the cognitive sign, the world sign, the adaptation to observe social classification, and he is basically considered as a trendsetter. He doesn't want to follow other people. So that was the presentation about what the fingerprint pattern says in each fingers based on the basic motivation. Alright, so now we are going to the page number 5. So here we deliver the character traits, and here you see to determine the character we based on the dominance on right brain and the left brain. And you see here when we split the brain, we will have the right brain hemisphere and also left brain hemisphere. On the right brain hemisphere, it has the characteristics of holistic, imaginative, creative, and non-structural thinking, while on the left brain hemisphere, it has the characteristic of logical, rational, and structural thinking. And the result of my client is 51.24% more on the right brain. So he has basically these traits, characteristic of imaginative, creative, and non-structural thinking. Therefore, as he told me, he took the social subject. So I mean like the subject that is non-science. I was quite happy because sometimes he could feel that he is not into science subject. So he is more like he needs something that is more like a creative and non-structural thinking. His brain is more responsive to that kind of things rather than numbers and theories. So, and based on the character profiling here, there are 4 triangles. As you see, there's the first one dominant, second one interpersonal, third one steadiness, and the fourth one is conscientious. So we see here, when we look at the number, here the level of conscientious is quite a lot. It means he is quite a perfectionist. So the highest percentage of the graph shows the character profile most responsive in one individual based on the principle of the brain hemisphere. So as you see, it was the perfectionist type that he is basically more dominant of. We continue to the page number 6, and this explains about the character traits. And here, by understanding one's character, we can understand our inner strengths as well as our inner weaknesses. Therefore, we can focus on improving our strengths while finding ways to compensate for our weaknesses. So, first graph is about openness. And we see here it is the introversion and extroversion that is in charge now. And as you see from my client, the extroversion is more than the introversion, so it has 53.49% extrovert, 46.51% introvert. So this explains the dimension of openness shows whether an individual channels his energy inwardly or outwardly. A higher percentage of extroversion show a personality type whose orientation is towards the outside world. Such an individual prefers social interaction and does things with others. On the other hand, the client has a higher percentage of introversion. It will show a personality whose orientation is toward a person with such personality likes being alone, spending time contemplating things, and is able to work by himself. Also, this client is full of concentration and focus and is good at processing data internally and find back office job suitable. That is when the introversion wins, but not in my client's case. My client is extrovert. It means he is the personality that likes to speak out things he doesn't really feel comfortable to. So he channels his energy outwardly so the people could hear it. Here we are not considering whether the other person receiving it as a good thing. Sometimes, when you, especially in the East culture, you cannot really say things openly, right? And he is basically trying to break that. He is trying to break down the basic rule of Eastern culture, but somehow he will face some challenges in order to be accepted in the society. So I was actually quite relieved when he told me he wants to study somewhere abroad. That will basically channel his energy even better than when he stays in our own country. So for some reason, but I'm not saying our country is bad. No, I mean like for his development, it is good to speak up whatever you feel that is not comfortable, and then you will find a solution towards it. Alright, the next table is about the receiving information, and this shows the dimension on how one processes data. So the higher percentage of fact, not in this case, it will show the tendency toward practicality, concrete and realistic data. And the few is what is. Such individuals choose proven methods and they focus on the now. So they are good at applying existing working methods. But here in this case, my client is having an opinion which is more than fact. Such individuals prefer to process data by looking at the patterns and the connections, abstract and conceptual thinking, and focusing on possibilities. Such individuals are imaginative, future-oriented, innovative, and full of inspirations and unique ideas. This is linked to the one that we talked about before about the right brain hemisphere, right? This is very suitable for him because when the right brain hemisphere is more active than the left brain hemisphere, obviously here the way he receives information is always based on the opinion, because sometimes the opinion could differ. Many different opinions could have different impact to our brain, and he actually likes to compare it, and he likes to say which one sounds more logical and which one is not, and then he'll believe that. So, and the next one is decision making. So here my client has slightly more objective result than subjective. It means that my client is an individual who always use logic in making decisions while focusing on task and objectivity. My client applies consistent principles and are really good at analyzing, while for those who is subjective, they are basically very influenced by feelings, empathy, and self-accepted value when making decisions. So, but not in this case. As you see in the triune brain, my client here is more like world, 90% world, which is cognitive, rather only 10% feeling. Therefore, he is quite an objective characteristic. So he relies on the fact, not the feeling. He could tell something is not right even though he hurt someone's feeling, because that is the truth. So here he is just trying to be honest. So basically the person and even the family needs to understand when he sometimes do that, because that is his character. So by doing the test, it is very good that all families involved basically, because only doing that we can understand that, oh, once is like that, the other is also like that, so they can communicate better, and when some making mistake, the other will realize, oh, that's just how he is. So that's why we need to give some space. So at the end, the understanding will be achieved in a family, and the communication inside the family would be even better. And the last graph on this page is the action. You see my client is having slightly more number into the plan than to the flexibility. So if you see higher percentage of plan, it is actually self-explanatory that the result shows individuals who always rely on systemic plan. My client always thinking before taking actions, and their actions are very organized. They dislike things which happen suddenly, out of ordinary, so everything has to be planned. Sometimes he is very irritated when, for example, he has planned and on the weekend, for example, mom, I'm gonna do this with father, and turns out on the weekend the mother has a better plan for the family, maybe kind of family gathering, and he doesn't like that because he sounded before it to his mom, and then he would be very irritated if the plan is not going according to his will, and maybe he'll find a win-win solution to that. Alright, so on the next page is about the thinking style and learning style, and here is the chapter about effective learning methods. As you know that each individual has different learning styles which correspond to their brain responsive ability. There's not a single person who is slow or dull in absorbing learning materials. What is true? The truth is that everyone has their own typical characteristics when it comes to learning. The good methods are the ones suitable with the working of the brain of each individual. And you see my client here on the thinking style, he is more 52% practical. It means he needs and he always looking for the practical solution rather than the theoretical solution. And here, speaking about VA key learning style, despite all the myths and the debate about it, we can just see whether it is actually in our case match, because for some clients of mine it matches a lot. So basically we can just take it whenever it matches, and whenever it don't, maybe we should consider to look at the other aspects. My client here has a dominance in kinesthetic body. It's around 18.18%, and the other rest of the dominant was distributed evenly. Basically visual picture is good with it, and also Audio is also good. So, but I suggest he has to learn it with involving all his body's part. So basically, the kinesthetic type of learner needs to involve their own body in order to absorb material. So basically, they need to practice, they need to experience it by themselves. Therefore, choosing non-science subject in the school would help him because he'll experience more practice and even real life situation, even more real life application. And as for the visual here, he is the one who likes to see graph but not to read. And I confirmed this with him. He told me directly that he found it very boring when he has to read a novel or something that has too long text. But another way, he likes to read like a comical book or something that has pictures in it. And when I notice how he studied, he tend to move his fingers, or he always shakes his leg during learning. Sometimes it disturbs other classmates, but I guess that's just how he is, and I just give the classmate understanding. And thankfully, the classmate was really nice, and she understands how he is. The way he learns is basically not too disturbing also for others. Again, as the kinesthetic, it was the type of learning that performed more operational movement, agility, and flexibility of the body. So, the next page is about intelligence distribution. And you see here, we do have the most responsive potential talent. As you see here, cerebral hemispheres are parts of the brain that consist of the frontal lobes, parietal lobes, and occipital lobes. And here you see that potential talents are measured based on more responsive nerve system in the cerebral lobes. Higher percentages in the graph shows higher responsiveness in certain area. Lower percentages in the graph do not show lower potential talents anyway. This is just to see how a slower responsiveness due to a more meticulous process. So we see here, this person relies so much on the intellectual intelligence. It means that the level of responsiveness is more towards intellectual intelligence rather than to involve any emotional intelligence. Here, I would explain briefly about relation to the development of potential intelligence. And there are basically different potential intelligences that cover, but I would focus on the intellectual intelligence only here. So this related to the dominant responsiveness of the frontal lobes. In these lobes, the analytical function of calculation and problem solving are more responsive. These individuals who are responsive in these areas tend to have a good skills in coping with things related to thinking and solving. Alright, so the next one is about the potential skill, and you see there is this response indicator, there's a graph, and there's a percentage below. And you see here, he has some gray area. It means the gray area here is the area that he needs to develop it more. But remember, taking fingerprint test was a lifetime test. So once you take it once, you don't need to take it many times in the future. This is once for the lifetime. It means that it wouldn't change. But you just said it was a gray meter. It could change by time, yes. But the level of maximal potential of gray matter is here limited. So basically, he could develop it. The gray matter is full. When he gets to make it full, he would make the technical visual observation, the very first graph, as the second highest graph on the potential response indicator. So we see here logical thinking is his very first strength. And the second one, when he has fulfilled the technical visual observation, so he has full graph of the area, there's no gray area anymore, he would make that into second strength of his potential skill. And the next potential skill is the conceptual imagination as well as the interpersonal ability. So we actually here we took only three highest. that are things that can be used for our future job. So here related to this, and considering that he would take something like social or maybe non-science subject, I would say that he could be a financial advisor or anything looking like a trend, or because of his interpersonal of good, he is also good in people, he would have performed a good service. For example, maybe a hotelier is good for him, or even a manager of an industry, also good for him. So anyway, he likes the job that comes to involving other people. I mean, like as the interpersonal ability, he has a diplomatic way to deliver things, and he is good at relying things. The next page is about the working style. As I just mentioned, the previous picture and this picture relates. For the working style, this will show the people's potential or ability to carry out tasks related to the fields of job of their choice. And we see here he is really good in decision, around 23.88%. It means around 24%, the highest than the other. So when he is good at decision, it means he has the ability to make decision and analyze the situation very perfectly. So for example, here he is really good when he is becoming the leader or the manager of things, because he analyzes things a lot, right? So the next quadrant, workers, you see here there's a circle and it divides into 4 sections. Here we see this client show the percentage of 25.27, similar between investor and business owner. So he'll be really good to become an investor because he has this freedom and creativity of taking risk. And also for the business owner, he actually good for a job that needs the freedom and creativity, independent of system, standard procedures, and is closely interconnected with social relationship with other team members as well as working partner. So he has that trait. So we know now it means what kind of job he should take in his future. So what about the pressure and instability condition? Anyway, this is basically shows the stress response system. As you see that stress and unstable conditions are often caused by potential imbalance in the brain function. One's inability in adjusting the working of the brain nerve system to the existing conditions results in possibility of pressure and the information flow being obstructed. Nevertheless, with good mental self-management, one can avoid the latent stress. So here, even the fingerprint could tell you the potential of stress. So we see here, this client has an output more than input. So when he faces stress, he would be very blatantly speaking it out loud. So maybe the person surrounding would be like, oh, what happened to him? The people surrounds him, or maybe the people that are really close to him would basically notice that he is basically disturbed or depressed. When that happens, let it be. Let him take everything out of his anger, because that is the way of he maintain the mental level to become normal. So here he has the brain resilience of about 17.34. It means it's in the area of he is start to be influenced by pressure. So he would be, when he is depressed, and we can really see it, he will be very irritated. Okay, so for the mental resilience, he has 2.49. It means he is in the area where he has stable mental condition. So here, for the pressure that comes internally, he would have something to work it on. He needs to take things out. But then for the mental resilience, so for the mental condition, he is very stable. It means that, for example, maybe the potential of being bullied and also being depressed about it, he would not be affected to that, because he has this strong mental resilience when it comes to other people. But when it comes to him, maybe he has the goal that has not been reached, or he has the plan that is cancelled, he'll be very angry. the problem is more like towards his own plan. Alright, so the next page is the one that's related to the choosing the future study. Alright, so basically normal full report ends at page 11, but since the client chose to be helped in terms of major study that he should take, I would continue to give him some enlightenment in terms of learning enrichment. Therefore, there is another continuation in the full report. So we're coming to the page number 12. Here, again repeated, we see that the profile of fingerprints is presented. And then, this is basically similar to the first page. On the page 13, it's about how learning enrichment is applied in terms of learning processing style. And here, on the left graph, we see that the percentage is most shown in the learning integration. So here he needs more time. So when you see the graph has more numbers in it, it means he needs more time to process that specific step of learning. So he needs to try to connect every chapter as possible. That is the challenge that he faces. So for the right graphs is basically how the mental capacity is preserved. So we see here on the graph that's shown the yellow dots, it was about the contemplation of persistence in talents. It means it's about the carefulness. So it is what he wants the people to see. And on the right side, it was the contemplation of consistency of interest. So it's more like for achievedness. So we see here basically he shows very significant result in initiative, in the decision. So here it is actually quite unique. So on the right graph, we see on the yellow dots row, it shows how he wants the people to see him. But then on the right side, it's how the people perceive him. So we see that in the socialization, in the external features, he is basically quite a lazy person to communicate to. But since he wants to maybe make a lot of friends, he is trying to be socialized. So here is like basically the yellow dots are the real you or the real client, and the red dots are what are things you want others to see from you. So we have here socialization that is very distinctive, also decision. He wants to be seen as an initiative person. So, and he wants to decide many things. That is the things that he wants to show to others. But in the reality, he needed lesser time to contemplate for that. So he just make the decision because that's how he actually most explained about on the previous explanation. And the next one, agility, is quite similar, flexibility also. And here, the uniqueness is in the adaptation. So he is basically very careful when it comes towards adaptation. He is quite observing character. So basically when he is in a new situation or in a new condition, he is adaptive. But in the first place, he would be really like observing things first. He would like see who is to be friend with, and if possible, he would be really introvert in the beginning, but once he got friends, he would make even more friends than before. So basically, it just needs time to get used to things. So that is about the learning enrichment. And so on the next page, which is page 14, we will see the self-learning motivation. And we see here every individual has inner motivational drive to learn based on the function of the brain. And by knowing this inner motivational drive, learning becomes easier and more effective when done according to the mental drive. And we see here he needs a self-perfection school. So he wants to learn to fulfill the need to know things better. So he wants to understand things into the deep, and he has to come to the conclusion where, oh, that's why, when blah blah blah, then blah blah blah. I witnessed it when he basically explained things that way. It's a sign that he does really understand the concept. So far, he just needs supervision, so he's basically good by himself. But here, if he really wants to ace things, he should maybe get some mentor in social study, maybe more like to the calculation of maybe more like things like history or geography if it's necessary. If not, then you can just ignore this because he is already on the right track. So here there's the exact science and non-exact science, and turns out his result shows he's really good in the non-exact science thing. So he prefers subjects related to social skills and also the creativity. And here recommendation of tertiary education, when we look at the rough graph, he's really good in the law and architecture. But that is a rough recommendation. So for the better recommendation, I'll come to the next page, which is the awaited page of all clients, especially those who wants to pursue higher study. And we see here he has a good reference in medical school, unless he has not really good character to it basically. But here, therefore, even though the recommendation is A, I wouldn't suggest him to do any medical subject. He's more into creativity and into the social things, yeah. So here also engineering, he's not really good into it. Computer also not advised. I would skip this page because the college majors that are presented here are more like science subject, and he does clearly tell me that he doesn't want to take any further study related to science. And then I look at the next stage. What about the economy? I noticed that he is basically quite good in counting, and for the culture he's also good in philosophy. And you know what's shocking is I previously mentioned about things like hotelier, right? And I also predicted that he could be really good in managing a hotel. I don't know, sometimes for me it needs a chemistry between me and the client to see things like that. Sometimes it's not, I don't know if it's any one of the psychic ability that I have, I wouldn't mention that anyway, but I kind of having many links that, oh, he has these features of many complete character traits that I studied before, that I analyzed, and he would be really good at something. And turns out when I look at the last page of the college majors recommendation, and I'll come to the tourism, and I'll see here the major is hotel management. He has 90% motivation, 82 character, and 80% skill, and I reference him as A. And now he ended up studying hotel management. In the beginning he was like putting it into secrets what he actually wants, but as I opened to him, hey, I think you will be really good also in tourism, and he was like shocked. He was like, Miss, that was I really think about. That was my plan actually since long time ago, and I was happy to hear that. So at the last page, basically just the optional page to see the enrichment, how he is being enriched in the digital potentials here, and he scored A for game and entertainment. So basically the brain will be really more responsive towards some game because he is very creative, and sometimes he needs that game to trigger the creativity in his brain. So through the game, I hope he will be enriched and use it as the spare time activity, because the brain also needs to be triggered, and it's a good time to spend it. Because as you know, I'm not suggesting him to read a book, because he told me directly that he doesn't really like to read the book. Even though in the further study in university, I told him, hey, you still really need to read, and he said yes, when I have to, but that's not my hobby, he said. Anyway, so that was all of the full reports explanation are presented to you about my client's fingerprint analysis test result. So to conclude all of the things here, fingerprint analysis test is used for those who wants to get help to find the talents that he could have, also to help them to pick or choose the major in a further study. When you don't believe it, that is fine. Everyone has an interest in something, and if you consider to take this with me, please do not hesitate to fill in the requirement into my email that I've been putting it into description, and I'll process the inquiry as soon as possible. So even though in this pandemic situation, we also offer the online solution for taking the fingerprint test. Therefore, I have to conclude my videos on today's explanation, and I do really hope that we can cope nowadays situation that is very not really stable right now, and I do hope everyone will be stay safe at home. And to let my channel growing, please support by hitting the subscribe and share, like, comment if necessary. Thank you so much for listening, and the talk is now wrapped up. Goodbye. We'll be right back.